Okay, so we're talking about Chaim of Brisk. This is a three-part series. I think sort of I guess maybe I've done three or four-part series about sort of famous Torah commentators or rabbis, and I'm kind of excited about the three that we're doing in the coming weeks. So Chaim of Brisk. That's what we have to say there. So first, let's say something about we have some guest support here for the source. Thank you. Good. Okay. Where to begin? So let's. In 1803, Rabbi Chaim of Valozhin established a yeshiva in the town of Valozhin. Valozhin today is in Belarus, and this yeshiva was different from other yeshivot, other institutes of Jewish learning, at least as they had existed for, like 1,000 years or more in Europe. This yeshiva was different in that it wasn't supported by the local community. Like in some communities prior to this, the community rabbi would have a handful of students in a Beit Midrash, and that's how Torah was taught. It was funded by the community. It was an institution of the community, and that was like the job of the community rabbi, was to teach his students, to study in yeshiva and to teach his students. Yeshiva Chaim in Valozhin was like a modern institution in a way that would be sort of familiar to us, sort of not that dissimilar in many ways from a university. It was funded by donors, and the donors were international. The students were international. There were faculty who had salaries and were directors, and I think there were dormitories. It was an institution that was distinct and separate from the town where it was located. There were town-gown tensions, just like any other university situation. This changed the nature of what a yeshiva was like. It became an elite institution, a much more elite institution, separate from the town where it happened to be located. And the Valozhin Yeshiva was known as the mother of the yeshiva. It kind of sparked a dozen or more daughter institutions of the yeshiva in similar towns, and it all harkened back to Valozhin. Chaim of Valozhin was a student of the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon, also a very important figure, the Gaon, the Genius of Vilna. He was also a different kind of Jewish leader. He was not a communal rabbi. He had no formal position of authority from anyone. His authority was from his own charisma, his own reputation as a scholar, as opposed to like a community hiring him. In fact, what's his name? I can't. Dov Weiss's Charutza from YU wrote a book about the Vilna Gaon a year or two ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. He called his book, I think, The Genius. His name, Eli Stern, was his name? Eli Stern. The Genius, Elijah of Vilna and the Making of Modern Judaism, Eliyahu Stern. Okay? So his thesis, I've not read the book, but from what I understand, his thesis is that the Vilna Gaon was like the first modern Jew, because he wasn't the product of his kehillah. He wasn't like part of that old-fashioned medieval structure. He was like his own man, and people paid attention to him just based on his own independent reputation as a genius. And he was a genius. We sometimes make a siyum, like a celebration on finishing a tractate of Talmud. The Vilna Gaon made a siyum on everything. He made a siyum when he finished Kol HaTorah Kula, both Nigla and Nistar, both the kind of revealed exoteric tradition and the esoteric mystical tradition. He had mastered all of it, and he made a siyum. He made a little party to celebrate that achievement.
How do you say that?
I don't know. You or I will probably never make such a siyum.
He had evidently studied every book he had,
correct,
or that anybody else he knew had.
Right, correct.
Today, that couldn't be done because there'd be thousands more.
There are more books.
But at that time, there was not really
There were still a lot.
Doesn't mean Rishonim.
Doesn't mean Rishonim?
No, this is right.
Look, first of all, in 1803, the there was a lot less printed. So let's say every printed book, he would have access to much fewer books. And every book worth, I mean, again, he was, we're not here to talk about the Vilna Gaon. If we were, he had very idiosyncratic, he was he studied in a different kind of way than others. But he wrote creative commentary on every book that he studied also, right? And he was a special person. So he also was fiercely opposed to the Hasidic movement, which was emerging and spreading in his time. And he tried to ban the Hasidic movement. They had a number of disagreements. There was some theological, mystical disagreement. With Shneur Zalman, the founder of Chabad Hasidut, which was active in Lithuania, he felt that, well, let's take a step back. In mystical tradition, it's all a little bit of a tangent, but I'll try not to spend much time, it's maybe important. In mystical tradition, how can an infinite God make space for, the universe? God contracts into God's self, and in that way makes space for the universe. This is the kind of cosmology of Kabbalah. According to Shneur Zalman, the founder of Chabad Hasidut, this contraction is only epistemological but not ontological. It appears as though God made space for the physical universe to come into existence by withdrawing into God's self. But that's only appearance. In reality, late atar panui, there is no space, there is no, that is free of God's presence. Whereas the Misnagdim felt, no, that is accurate. It's not just apparent, it's reality. Okay, so according to the Misnagdim, the opponents of Hasidut, this movement, they're pantheists, right, and not as opposed to monotheists. So that's a big deal. I think some scholars say that wasn't actually the real animating force of their dispute, but really it was the role of Torah study in the hierarchy of Jewish life. And for the Hasidic movement, Torah study was less important than prayer, and for their opponents, Torah study remained the dominant, the pinnacle of the hierarchy, the most refined mitzvah, and the top of the hierarchy of Jewish society. So Chaim of Valozhin, a generation later, he's a student of the Vilna Gaon, he realizes that this battle for Torah study and the primacy of Torah study needs a new tactic, because the Vilna Gaon failed in his effort to fight the movement by trying to excommunicate them and imposing bans upon them. That didn't work. So Chaim Valozhin, his tactic is, well, we actually need a new type of institution to promote Torah study as the pinnacle value, as the peak value. And that institution is the yeshiva. That's why he establishes a yeshiva in Valozhin, 1803, which was 1 or 2 years after, up to 3 years after the death of the Vilna Gaon. He dies in 1800, 1801, I don't remember. Valozhin Yeshiva was established in 1803, so this is his reaction, right? The Vilna Gaon's dead, we need to restore and defend the primacy of Torah study as a religious value, as a place in Jewish society, and this institution can do that. So after Chaim Valozhin dies, in 1821, Rabbi Yitzchak of Valozhin, his son, becomes the Rosh Yeshiva, the academic head of the yeshiva. In 1849, Rabbi Eliezer Fried is Rosh Yeshiva together with Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. There are two co-Rosh Yeshiva. This lasts very long. In 1854, Rabbi Fried dies, and Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, known as the Netziv, whom we've spoken about, I've taught about last year, is co-Rosh Yeshiva with Rabbi Yosef Joseph Halevi Soloveitchik, who is known as the Beit Halevi. That was his. That was the books that he wrote, Beit Halevi. The two of them were co-Rosh Yeshiva. They ruled this yeshiva together, and that did not work out well. And there are all sorts of legends about, like in the mythology of the yeshiva, they really got along well. It was just their zealous students who, kind of kept the struggle going. That's probably not true. I think the two of them probably couldn't get along well. They had very different personalities, different focuses as educators, and they eventually went before Beitin, and the Beitin said to Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, you'll leave and go someplace else. So Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin remains in Valozhin, and he is Rosh Yeshiva in Valozhin until the yeshiva eventually is closed by the Russian government in 1882. Is that good? 1882. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
That's when Tsar Alexander III was assassinated.
In the mythology of the yeshiva world, the Valozhin Yeshiva is closed because the Russian government insisted they introduce secular studies, and the Rosh Yeshiva, the Netziv, refused to allow any secular studies in yeshiva, and he closed the yeshiva rather than allow secular studies. That is not true. That has been investigated. It's not true. He did allow secular studies into the yeshiva, but the Russian government wanted to shut it down, and they did. They knew that it would. I mean, this was all part of the ideological battle of Haskalah. There were forces within the Jewish community with allies in the Russian government wanting to modernize the Jewish community and help them assimilate, become sort of more, whatever, not unlike things that we, experience, right? Not right? Not that we experience, that other immigrant, minority groups that are less assimilated are facing. And they thought that the yeshiva was an institution that was keeping the Jewish community backward and isolated, and so Valozhin, as the mother of yeshiva, was sort of in their crosshairs. So it was shut down. There was really no choice. They wanted to radically change the curriculum, but Hasidism was willing to allow some secular studies. In any event, that's Valozhin. But
I was at a lecture by Jonathan Steinberg, who's a professor at Penn. Jonathan Steinberg's his father. So he said his grandfather was at Valozhin and was like one of the people reading communist pamphlets, like inside his Gemara.
Valozhin was also, it was an interesting place. There were all sorts of people who went there who had already been kicked out of other yeshiva. It sort of had a reputation. It was like very elitist, very high-level Torah studies, but also attracted really smart smart people who, like some of the great heretics of the Jewish, history came out of Valozhin, which is like that. That's the kind of place it went. So there's a whole interesting history as well of the struggles between the administration and the students over some, people reading communist or Zionist literature in the, in the dorms, whatever, etc. So Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, our focus, right? The Beit Halevi, he moves to Slutsk and becomes the rabbi there. 1875, he moves to Warsaw. 1878, he is invited to become the rabbi of Brisk, which is known to the rest of the world as Brisk the Tufts, famous for the eponymous Treaty of Brest the Tufts, which ended World War I on the Eastern Front. Okay? But it's known amongst Jews as Brisk. And 1855, his son of Chaim of Brisk is born in Brisk. He was born in Valozhin. 1855, he was born still in Valozhin, when his father was still in Valozhin. 1880, he's faculty of yeshiva in Valozhin. Yeshiva was closed in 1882. So Chaim moves to Brisk, where his father is living at this point. His father dies in that same year, 1882, and Chaim becomes a rabbi in Brisk, and he establishes a yeshiva there in Brisk. Okay, so that's Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk. Just to continue the story a little bit further, there's a very, it's a very extensive rabbinic family tree, but just Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk has two sons. One, Wolkenfeld Soloveitchik, who moves to Israel and establishes the Brisker Yeshiva in Jerusalem, which is to this day, a staunchly anti-Zionist Haredi yeshiva. They don't take any funding from the government. It's a very prestigious yeshiva in Israel. His other son, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, comes to America and is a Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. Rav Moshe Soloveitchik has three sons and a daughter also, right? One of his sons, Shmuel Soloveitchik, was known as the funny Soloveitchik. He was a chemistry professor. He died young in the 60s. Aaron Soloveitchik, who spells his name without a T, came to Chicago, and he was at HCC and Brisker Yeshiva here in Chicago. And with Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, the second Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, is the one who had the PhD from the University of Berlin and was at YU and in Boston, and he's known as the Rav. Okay, so he is the grandson of Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk. Okay, and his family, whatever, continues to be his children and grandchildren continue in important positions with a lot of the same names as well. Okay, so what do you want to say? So the second source here. This is I'm not going to read it inside. You can take it and look it over. This is from Yehuda Mirsky's biography of Rav Kook, which includes like a several-page, beautiful description of Lithuanian Jewry and the role of the yeshiva in Lithuanian Jewry. So that's source two. Because Rav Kook was a student at Valozhin Yeshiva along with like many other famous people. So 2 things about Chaim Soloveitchik's personality and his ideology, and then we'll talk about his, what he's most famous for in sort of Torah scholarship. So 1895, there's a fire in Brisk, and Chaim Soloveitchik, as the rabbi in Brisk, devotes himself to helping his community recover from this fire. That's source 3. This is the Encyclopedia Judaica entry on Chaim. It says, most of his salary was given to the needy, and as a result, he was frequently in debt. In the winter, he left his wood store unlocked so that the poor might help themselves. The lay leaders complained they could not afford the costs involved, but he replied that he would have to instruct his wife not to light his fire, since it was impossible for him to sit in warmth, I think, right from while knowing that the poor were freezing. In 1895, Brisk was swept by a fire which destroyed many homes. All Soloveitchik's energies were devoted toward the rebuilding. He slept in the synagogue porch among those who had lost everything in the fire, and the stream of scholars and lay leaders who wanted to consult with him came there. Stringent personally in the observance of religious precepts, he was always lenient when applying them to others. That's many, many stories with Chaim in that genre. Source 3, this is from Halachic Man, right? Halachic Man is the Rav, right? Rabbi Dr. Joseph Soloveitchik of New York and Boston. He wrote his classic book in 1945. In many ways, it's a defense of, there are 2 source 3s, I'm sorry, the first source 3. It's a defense of his grandfather, Rabbi Chaim. Okay, that's in large part the animating force of this book, to defend that type of personality. So he writes, once Rabbi Chaim of Brisk was asked what the function of a rabbi is, Rabbi Chaim replied, to redress the grievances of those who are abandoned and alone, to protect the dignity of the poor, and to save the oppressed from the hands of his oppressor. Neither ritual decisions nor political leadership constitutes the main task of Halachic Man. Far from it, the actualization of the ideals of justice and righteousness is the pillar of fire which Halachic Man follows when he, as a rabbi and teacher in Israel, serves his community. More, through the implementation of the principles of justice and righteousness, man fulfills the task of creation imposed upon him, the perfection of the world under the dominion of halakha, and the renewal of the face of creation. No religious cult is of any worth if the laws and principles of righteousness are violated and trampled upon by the foot of pride. Okay, so that's also a piece of who he was. And again, that was his personality. Again, like he left his wood unlocked. He moved to the synagogue with the homeless people after the fire. He would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic. What if somebody left a foundling baby on his doorstep? He'd go and check the door. And presumably, maybe it happened once. I don't know. He'd wake up. Those are the types of stories they told Rabbi Chaim, and very, the leniency in applying halakha to other. The story of he would consult with, some of the other town rabbis in Brisk. I think when he was more focused on yeshiva, there were other rabbis in the community. He would say, "Tell me your answer, but don't tell me why. Because if you tell me why, I'll have to refute and argue, and I won't find your reasoning convincing. But you're the rabbi of the town, so you tell me why, and we'll accept it, and that way we'll solve this, that, or the other practical problem for this person in the community who needs help." That's another story about Rabbi Chaim. So, what was he like as a teacher? And this in here, this is where his innovation is really also like most revolutionary, and he changed the way Torah is studied. And I think most great number of yeshivot that exist today, the classic yeshivot, they are following in the tradition that was established by Rabbi Chaim. The method of, with tweaks and different nuances, but his method of lamdut, of scholarship, will change the way Talmud was studied and the way Torah is studied. So maybe we'll look at an example and then we can characterize it. Maybe we'll look at one example, and just in terms of like sources. So this is, he actually published nothing in his lifetime. This is his Chidushim on the Rambam, his novellae, short 2-3 page essays on the Rambam, maybe 200-300 of them in this book. It was published in the 1930s, so a generation or so after he died. We have some of his writings directly on the Talmud. There's like a family tradition amongst the Briskers, amongst the Soloveitchiks, not to publish very, very little. Once they're no longer alive and they can't prevent people, all of their notes and all of the, everyone who sat in their class, they published their notes. So that's true with his grandson, with the Rav, with Joseph Soloveitchik of Boston, New York. He published very little in his lifetime, and since he's died, there's been like an explosion of publication, manuscripts that were published by students or people who sat in his class for many years publishing their notes, etc. So,
What was the rationale?
I think the rationale was perfectionism. I think that was the rationale, right?
People who drove him in the car once a week also.
Yes, correct. The Brisker, yes, correct. It's called the Rough Speaks, right? Or driving the road, whatever. Yeah, correct. No, it's a whole boom industry now. Interestingly, with the rest of the rug, there are the different branches of the family have different philosophies. Like the siblings have competing publications, such as like some of the manuscripts ended up with different siblings who feel differently about giving access to it for publication. So that's also interesting. So this is his book, his Chidushim on the Rambam. This is a book that I looked at. Really a wonderful book. This is writer of Zevin. I don't know when he Zevin, early 20th century, Tufshin Yudbet. So that's 1952, right? Lived in Israel, and he wrote. This is 7 biographies of Torah scholars, Ishim V'Shitot, like the person and their positions, and what they said, what they taught. So it's like a sort of an intellectual biography, somewhat hagiographic, but in a really loving way. And it's a neat book. This is an essay that Chaim Seiman, who hopefully, if we sooner or later we'll try to bring him as a scholar into the shul. He's a law professor at Villanova, who is also a Torah scholar. He's coming out with a book on legal theory of Jewish law, and he wrote an essay, Legal Theology, the Turn to Conceptualism in 19th Century Jewish Law, in which he says that the same endeavor that was happening, that Chaim and Brisk was sort of the revolution in Talmud study, corresponds to a similar process that took place in like Western law schools as well, legal scholarship, even though there was no connections whatsoever. The same thing happened in the Middle Ages when the Tosafists began their dialectic study of Talmud at the same time in the same place as canon law and non-canon law. People were doing dialectical study, and again, there are no connections. Sometimes like an idea is in the zeitgeist, ready to be Okay, so that's enough talking about it. Let's look at an example, and then we'll say some more things about maybe a few more examples. This is a good example, and thank you for Jonathan for translating this this passage from Chaim. So that saved you a lot of time. So this is the Rambam, and then I guess a lot of his. I mean, this book it's presented as Chidushim on the Rambam, right? Maimonides, and that's the other piece. Maimonides wrote his Mishnah Torah. This is his magnum opus. It's the only work he wrote in Hebrew. All his other works were written. All his other works were written in Arabic. He wrote in perfect Mishnah Hebrew, which is like a remarkable thing for someone to do in the 13th century or 12th century, and his writing is so good. Like he was able to create something that was both a law code and also a work of art and a work of philosophy. Right? It's beautiful writing. It's which Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, who is the great grandson of Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk and just Soloveitchik's son, wrote an essay on the artistry of Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah, polemic and art. Okay, so it's a law code. It has hidden polemics against the Karaites and others, and it's a work of art. And he writes, if I can find it, he said, you'll see why. He says, because it's a brilliant essay. Both Mishnah Torah and the Shulchan Aruch are towering works, but Mishnah Torah, Rambam's work, is that rarest of things, a book of law, a work of secreture, a discursive reasoning that is at the same time a work of art, and a work of art creates its own imaginative universe. You can decline to enter that universe, as in Ashkenaz in the late medieval and early modern period, reject the Yad, even as amended by Haggadah and Maimonides. However, if If you choose to enter that world, you must do so on its terms rather than on your own. For a work of art is self-justificatory. It commands rather than seeks attention. It constitutes an end in itself and resists any attempt to turn it into a means to have it serve a purpose on its own. You can take the Mona Lisa or you can leave it, but you cannot turn it into something other than what it is or use it as an instrument to attain some other artistic goal. Okay, that's around it. This is beautiful. It's like incredible pages. I just skipping. In speaking of Mishnah Torah as a masterpiece, I have made analogies to works of the imagination as literature and art. Perhaps an analogy from philosophy, a field like law of discursive thinking and articulation may be in place. I would put the matter this way. There are some thinkers who wrote poorly, Kant and Hegel, some who wrote well, Descartes, Berkeley, and Hume, and a very few who wrote too well, Plato and Nietzsche, okay? So well that only sometimes so well that one sometimes does not know what they said. This is not a matter of opaqueness. Kant is only too often opaque, but the range of possible meanings is restricted and all interpretations will yield a solution that is distinctly Kantian, whereas diametrically opposed interpretations are offered of the thinkers who wrote too well. Despite their surface clarity, crucial passages allow a wide range of different emphases and multiple, even conflicting patterns of linkage. To this day, we do not know whether Plato was a libertarian or totalitarian, or whether Nietzsche was a liberal or proto-fascist. But differently, Berkeley and Hume were pellucid stylists. Plato and Nietzsche were artists, and their writings have all the polyphony of literary masterpieces, their capacity to sustain in places the most contrary interpretations. I suggest Maimonides be added to the small band of thinkers who wrote too well. Not just Maimonides of the Guide of the Perplexed, a book openly written as a riddle-wrapped enigma, but equally the Maimonides of the Mishnah Torah, a work of crystalline clarity and protean ambiguity. Okay? So, I love that content. I love Chaim writes. I love the way he writes. A little outrageous. So Chaim found the Rambam, like he was like a tough nut to crack. Okay, that he was the focus of his critique. The Rambam doesn't write the sources. He writes, this is the law. Here's what you do. Everything's clear. Everything's written out. It's laid out. It's there before you. No sources. So how did the Rambam get to this place? So he's interpreting this Talmudic passage, obviously, but in a strange way. And here he's contradicting himself. So how is he doing? So the Rambam, it brings forth, it elicits scholarship to try to, that goes back into the Rambam itself. Like what did he mean and how did he derive that? And that's the launching pad for Chaim Brisk's, scholarship. Okay. So here, the Rabbi writes, talking about prayer, laws of prayer. So there are 5 things that prevent one from fulfilling the mitzvah to pray, even though it's the right time. Okay? Taharat yadayim, v'kisui ha'erva, v'taharat makom, tefillah, v'dvarim ha'chovzim oto, v'kevanat halev. So you have to have clean hands, you have to have all your naked parts covered up, the place has to be clean, you can't have, dirty diapers, or you can't pray in the house, whatever. And things that are rushing you, if you have, so somebody distracting you or rushing you along, you don't have like the time to focus on prayer. Vik kavanat halev, and the intention of the heart. Okay. Skipping 15, right? Kavanat halev ketzah. So how does this work? So explain how this works. Kol tefillah she'ena b'kavanah ena tefillah. V'nipalel b'lo kavanah chozer v'nipalel b'kavanah. Okay, so any prayer that's done without kavanah, without intention, that's not prayer. And if you found that you prayed without kavanah, you have to go back and pray again. You haven't fulfilled your obligation. If you're too distracted, it's forbidden to pray until you calm down. If you're traveling, you should wait 3 days after the journey until you start praying again. We don't do this, okay? But for a different story, we can talk about that, about why. But that was the original halakha. If you're traveling, you don't have to say shachrit min chamar for 3 days, because how could you possibly have settled mind? Okay, then. Ketzad hi kavanah. So what is kavanah? Shifneh et libo mikol machshavot v'yir'atzmo ki'ilu hu omed lifnei shekhinah. What does this mean, kavanah? You should turn your heart from all other thoughts and see yourself as though you're standing before the divine presence. The fika, therefore, tzarich le'shev me'at kodem atfilah. כי לכוון ליבו, ואחר כך יתפלל בנחת ובתחנונים, ולא יעשה תפילתו כמי שהיה נושא מסוי ומשליחו והולך לו, לפיכך צריך לשב מעט אחר תפילה, ואחר כך יפטר. החסידים הראשונים היו יפטר, period. החסידים הראשונים היו שוהים שעה אחת קודם תפילה, ושעה אחת אחר תפילה, מרחים בתפילה שעה. So you should wait a little bit before you start to pray, and you should wait a little bit after you pray, because you shouldn't appear as though it's like a burden that you're easy to shake off. The Hasidim Rishonim, they used to spend an hour preparing for prayer. They used to spend an hour, coming down from the prayer experience, and they would spend an hour praying. So it's 3-hour shachrit, mincha and maariv. Okay? So we do Psukei Zimra is our hour before prayer. It takes us 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the day, but that Psukei Zimra comes from this practice of, preparing to pray. Okay. This is in chapter 1 of Hilchot Tefillah. Okay. In chapter 10, he writes this. Mish yitpalel v'lo kiven libo, yachzor v'yitpalel b'kavanah. So if you pray without kavanah, you go back and pray again. V'im kiven libo b'bracha rishona, shuv ein tzarich. But if you had kavanah for the first bracha, you don't have to go back.
This is the Brisk.
This is Rambam. No, this is Rambam. This is all Rambam. Yep. If you make a mistake in the first 3 brachot, you have to go back to the beginning. If you make a mistake in the last 3, you go back to avodah, which is the third from the end. If you make a mistake in the middle, you go back to that bracha number 7, bracha number 8 of the Amidah, go back to that bracha, and you complete the Amidah from there. Okay. And so too, if it's the Shvet Tzibur, same goes for him.
At that point, we're talking about making a
Mistake, yes.
not concentrating.
Correct.
So it would be adequate to concentrate on the first bracha.
That's what it seems.
And be finished.
It seems like that. So that seems to be a contradiction, right? See, chapter 1 seems to suggest that you need kavanah in order to pray. Chapter 10 seems to suggest you only need kavanah in the first bracha. That seems to be a contradiction, right? It is a contradiction, okay? So, how is it resolved? So, here we have, this is, Jonathan made this translation. I guess for a publication that didn't accept it, but we accepted it, so thank you. Basically, I don't know if we do it all on the side.
Where's this from?
Oh, this is here. This is
from the
chapter. Yeah,
Beit.
yeah. This is the first one actually. No, it's not good. It's the second one.
Has it been translated into English?
I don't believe so.
It would be wonderful to have that.
I'm working on something else right now.
You'd be famous around the world.
He's just getting his PhD in statistics, but it's...
Oh, this could be your hobby. A page a week. 4 years is up.
So Chaim says, so we'll do half in, half out, the second paragraph. 2 types of kavanah and tefillah. There are 2, kavanah and tefillah means 2 things. First type of kavanah, that's like Pirush HaMilah, that's the explanation of what the words mean. And the second type of kavanah is that he should be mekavan, he should intend, have in his mind that he stands in tefillah before God. Okay? That's the 4th chapter. In the 4th chapter is what is kavanah, that you turn your heart and you see yourself standing in the presence of God. That kavanah defines tefillah. Lacking that kavanah, lacking the awareness that one is standing in the presence of God, then one isn't praying. As opposed to kavanah of, I'm paying attention to the words that I'm reciting, and I know more or less what they mean. And I intend to fulfill my mitzvah obligation of reciting shachri. That's akin to kavanah and other mitzvah. But if I don't have kavanah, if I'm not aware that I'm standing in the presence of God, then what am I doing? Then I'm not praying. Definitional to prayer is that I'm standing in the presence of God. And if I'm not aware of that, I don't have that mindset, then I'm not praying. As opposed to kavanah as it's essential or accidental, right? There's essential kavanah. What am I doing right now? I'm praying. What does that mean? That means, in my mind, I'm standing in the presence of God. Then there's incidental kavanah, like an enhancement of this act of tefillah, which is like Perush HaMilah, like the explanation of the words. Okay, so he's resolved his contradiction by taking this word and saying it really can be kind of broken up into kind of two conceptual pieces. There's kavanah as like the like defining this as an act of prayer, and there's kavanah as like the prayer, like what is he or she thinking about? Does he know what the words mean? Does she know what the words mean as they're being recited? And that way he resolves these two chapters. Give another more like, if you understand that? You see how this is? Okay? So it's not just, I guess, it doesn't seem so exciting. It's two different words. He's saying they mean two things in two different places. But it's a little more than that, because it's
But it could even be, if the kavanah of just like standing in front of God, if that is kind of the concept at the first bracha, now that you're aware in front of the infinite, that you're praying in front of the infinite, then of course it's going to be carrying through for you throughout all of the Tfilat Shmona Esrei, because, how can you not be in awe in front of God? So once you are ignited with that, that is going to be carrying
Fine.
And then there's the secondary kavanah of like understanding what you're actually saying.
So is that the method, to divide a question into smaller parts?
It's the method is to take contradiction and he does it. He then goes and explains several other passages in Talmud all around this. It's called a chakira. Is how it's spoken at Yeshiva. It's an investigation that you can take one question and what are we focusing on? What type of kavanah is it? Are we focused on the object, like the chetza, like is it the individual who's praying? Like what does he have in mind? Is it what the words mean? Or are we focused on what defines this as an act of prayer? The chetza, the thing itself, right? Is this what defines this as a moment of prayer? Well, you have to have in mind you're standing before God. That's what makes it prayer. And then there's this person who's praying, what is he? Does he know what he's saying? Is he paying attention to the words, or is he daydreaming? And those are two different things, right? And another classic example. Okay, so there's a dispute in. There's a dispute in Psachim about whether or not Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis in the Mishnah, whether chametz has to be burned before Pesach, whether it can be destroyed in any method. Rabbi Yehuda says chametz has to be burned, and after it's burned, he says the ashes can be used. There's no prohibition on the ashes. Chachamim say chametz can be destroyed in any method, but the ashes remain forbidden. Okay, and this seems to be. So this is a problem. So what's this about? Rabbi Chaim says it's a dispute about whether we focus on the gavra, the individual, or the chefza. Right? If the mitzvah is on the object, chametz must be destroyed, and so burning is the method of its destruction. That's what the halakha is focused on, and so that's why it has to be burned. Whereas the chachamim say no, the focus of this mitzvah is on the gavra, is on the individual Jew. She can't own chametz on Pesach Shabbos. He has to get rid of all his chametz, and so he could throw it into the sea, he could throw it scatter into the wind, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, the focus is not on the object, the focus is on the individual. So that's a chakira, that's an investigation that explains this machloket, this dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, and then it also explains other things. So and this now explains this great question to Rabbi Akiva Eger, one of the great 18th century scholars asked on this. Okay, the Torah in the 13th century writes that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the ashes of the chametz are permissible. You can, use them for making ink or something. Okay, like any other thing in halakha that has to be burned, like avodah zarah, whatever, anything you burn has to be burned out. The ashes, once it's burned, you can, and according to the Chachamim, the Rabbi, right, that you can destroy it in any method. You cannot use the ashes or the crumbs, whatever remains. Like any other thing that the halakha is, it has to be buried. Some things are buried, they remain forbidden even after they're buried. Some things, the halakha is, they're burned, and they are permitted once they're burned. So that's the Torah. The Torah says, right, the Mishnah doesn't say that, right? The Mishnah says, Rabbi says you have to burn it, Chaim say destroy it any way. The Torah goes, oh, so therefore it follows, like just like everything else that is burned, the ashes are permissible, and for the Chachamim, for the majority, anything that is buried, the ashes remain forbidden. So Rabbi Eiger says the reason why the ashes are permissible for things that are burned, Tosfot explained, that's because there's a mitzvah in burning them. And once the mitzvah is done, the prohibition is gone, and you can use the ashes for whatever you want. Which is different from things that have to be buried. Things that have to be buried, there's no mitzvah in the burial. The mitzvah is just preventing somebody else from using this forbidden thing, so we bury it so no one will accidentally make use of it in an inappropriate way. And so we never say the mitzvah was done on this object. There is no mitzvah to be done on this object, just burying it to get it out of the way. And so it remains forbidden even after it's buried. Therefore, chametz, right, even according to the Chachamim who say that you can destroy it in any method, you're still doing a mitzvah. So why should it be forbidden even after you destroyed it? Okay, that's.
But isn't there something with this that you're not actually destroying? If it's not burned.
You destroy it by mixing it with flushing the toilet. You mix it. You.
So, but okay. So, I mean, in my head, there could be like crumbs somewhere. You know, like if it's not a complete.
Let's say you mix it with. You mix it with bleach, so it's not chametz anymore.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But you still might use it to. You still might want to use it to putty up your, I don't know, something, right? Whatever. Right? Okay. But it really should be the same, because if the reason why once things burned you can use it is because the mitzvah was done, so the isser, the prohibition goes away. So machloket Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, that shouldn't matter, right? There's a mitzvah. Everyone agrees there's a mitzvah to destroy chametz. Yehuda and the sages both agree that. So right. It really should be the same. The residue, the dust, the ashes should be the same for all. So, but based on Reb Chaim's chakira, based on his investigation, that distinction he makes, chefza gavra, so now there's no problem. Now, mitzvah, right? The mitzvah was done to it. Hu im habeira b'shreifa bilvad, shveguf hachefza nasa mitzvah v'jinu, shekishinasa mitzvato b'chefetz nitar chefetz, right? When we say the things that are burned, that the mitzvahs, and that's if the mitzvah is focused on the thing itself. Chametz must be burned. Chametz must be destroyed, and if it must be destroyed, there's a method of destroying it, and that method is burning. And that's Rabbi Yehuda's position. So once it's been burned, the mitzvah was done, you can use the ashes. Whereas the Chachamim, the focus isn't on the chametz, the focus is on the Jewish owner of the chametz. I have to make sure I don't own chametz, so I can destroy it anyway whatsoever, but there's no particular mitzvah that, like, on the chametz itself. So yes, I have to destroy it so that no Jew owns this. I have to make sure no Jew owns the chametz on Pesach, but even after I've done whatever I've done, no mitzvah was done to the chametz itself, and therefore it remains prohibited. So, in other words, so he's analyzed, what's the nature of this mitzvah? Let me get down to the core concept of the nature of the mitzvah of prayer, the nature of the mitzvah of destroying, getting rid of chametz before Pesach. And by conceptualizing in this way, like using a simple tool, right? Chefza gavra, is it a mitzvah that's like on the person or a mitzvah on the object? What's the focus of the mitzvah? And by identifying the question, I now resolve all these. Now I understand the Yehuda, I understand the Chachamim, I understand why you burn, I understand why you bury, I understand why it is or isn't permissible afterwards, and all of these separate questions, they all can now be resolved and solved by this one concept that like unlocks the question. That's the Brisker method, to identify like these core conceptual investigations that then allow everything else to kind of resolve themselves.
So
yeah.
One of the previous form of study would just have been to make sure you understand burning versus destroying, using versus non-using. This takes it to a higher level of comprehending the essence of the mitzvah and
Yes.
the enterprise and becomes, in a sense, this is why it is superior to prayer, because in a sense, it is coming directly into contact with the mind of God.
Absolutely. Yes, couldn't say it better. Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. The act of Torah
It's a
study.
form of worship in the sense of becoming one with the
With the mind of God, yeah. And it's creative. It's creative because you're discovering, right? The Torah scholar, as this heroic figure, the yeshiva student, right, is discovering, using these chakirot, these investigatory tools, to unlock secrets that are there in the Torah and resolving all these questions and communing with the mind of God. And that's what's happening. So what's not happening? What's being jettisoned with this method? So a few things. One thing that's being jettisoned is the actual focus on the text of the Talmud itself, because the back and forth and the arguments that are made become much less important than like the underlying concept. So the risk of that, first of all, it means you can be a little bit lazy as a student, because you might, you don't have to pay attention to all of the words, what they mean exactly, because a lazy student can have fun with Brisker learning without necessarily being careful as much as he or she should be in like the actual words of the Talmud, because the words of the Talmud don't matter as much. The flow of the argument, he said this, then he said that, and then he responded this way. That doesn't matter quite as much, because we're just focused on like what are the positions, let's sort of just distill these positions and what are they all about, whereas the back and forth of the Talmudic argument becomes less important or less interesting. What else isn't being done here, like actual practical halachic decision making is not being done here, and this method can even like mitigate against like that kind of scholarship, because if every dispute represents a facet of the infinite mind of God, and like the point is not to decide who's right, because no one's right? Each one, right? Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, right? Who's right? Right? I mean, they're both, and they're both expressing a facet of this infinite truth. The mitzvah is to, either the mitzvah is burning, or it's destroying, it's the chayfetz of the chametz, or it's the individual has to relinquish his chametz. You can never resolve a question like that. That sort of stands forever. And so, how would you? And the same is true for any halachic dispute, because each one represents like this facet of the divine truth. So Brisker is famously, don't write tshuva. They don't care about that. So, in fact, Chaim, as we saw, he was involved in the community. He had values. And that's true of a lot of these Brisker rabbis. But at least the stereotype about them is they're not interested in practical halacha. Certainly, the yeshiva don't focus on that, and the philosophy, like practical halacha, it's almost like someone has to do it. So someone has to learn all this stuff, and learn all the shachs and the tazas and all the response literature. So to be able to like be the technical expert who can provide practical halacha guidance, but the real like the hierarchy is the theoretical rather than the practical.
So does that help to explain why he was lenient? I don't remember which of the shots.
Well, it certainly explains why he was strict for himself.
Right.
The Briskers are famously strict for themselves because like for 1,000 years everyone's been lenient about some topic. Mm-hmm. But like if I can see, but like like this position in the Rambam, this position in is exhibiting this element of truth, and so I'm going to embrace that. So fantasy Briskers will, called the Brisker Chumras, they sort of ahistorical, like no one's done this for 1,000 years, but based on their scholarship, this is like a way to be extra strict.
But they don't impose that kind of...
Not necessarily impose that on others. I mean, certainly Chaim didn't. Chaim didn't, and many others don't as well, yeah. Also, you could be extra lenient sometimes as well. I mean, you see that some of the scholars who learn Torah this way have some leniencies that are very creative, again, based on this type of learning, yeah.
I'll try to clear. So they take an argument, and they explain why this rabbi came this way, why that way, because they saw that problem from different viewpoints, and they never make a decision as to what's correct.
Yes.
So they're not really exposing the mind of God. They're saying there was diversity in the statements.
No, I think the mind, in other words, the God gave us the mitzvah to destroy chametz, and that could mean one of two things. and Rabbi Yehuda thought it meant this thing, and the Chaim thought it meant the other thing. And our job as Torah scholars is to realize that God's command contains both, and by understanding that that fundamental question is at the heart of half a dozen, other arguments, right? That it all comes down, right? That's really when it works. You have like many questions, and it all comes down to.
That's where the rabbis get, you're right, and you're right, and you're also right.
Yeah, but it's yes, because that's a joke about.
Yes.
It's not about pluralism. It's not about it's about what does it mean to study Torah. But studying Torah is not about. It's not about who's right. It's about what's the argument about, and what ideas could this mitzvah contain. So those are pitfalls. I mean, there are Rabbi Lichtenstein, who is among the certainly in our world, my world, one of the greatest. Contemporary, died 2 years ago. You have the almost contemporary exponents, of Brisker learning, and somebody direct, from this train of, he was son-in-law and student of Joseph Soloveitchik in New York, who was the grandson of Chaim, and took that method to the next level and developed it in all sorts of ways. When those of his students who've gotten, kind of frustrated, there've been moments of, like, I really needed a more conclusive psak halakha from you, and people often have turned to him, for like, what is the answer in it, and he said, well, it's you can't, it's he had values and he had ethics and very, very strongly, taught that, but there are also moments where his whole inclination is towards, complexity and seeing both sides. So the Shemitah year in Israel, right? I mean, that's a good example. I'll say one other thing after that, and we should want to keep you too long. Right, the Shemitah year in Israel has been agriculture is forbidden in the 7th year. Many agricultural labors are forbidden in the 7th year. Every Shemitah year since the rise of modern Zionism has been like a crisis. What do we do? Can we keep farming? Right. So already in the 19th century, they said, let's sell the land, the farmland, to somebody who's not Jewish, and then we continue to farm it because it's owned by this person who's not Jewish, and then that's how we'll continue our agriculture. And this was done every 7 years with a controversy every 7 years. And halakhically, part of that controversy hinges on the question of if a Gentile owns land in Eretz Yisrael, does that non-Jewish ownership undo the requirement of that land being observing Shemitah or not? And that's a dispute among the Rishonim. So now it is in some, so the one who says it does, the one who says non-Jewish ownership of the land of Israel means there's no mitzvah of Shemitah. It's like the Beit Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. So it's a pretty big hitter, right? You would think that if he was in a dispute with somebody, like that's, you have broad shoulders to rely upon. But if you're a Brisker, like how could you, like, right? It's a does or does it not? What's the nature of the mitzvah Shemitah? Is it, is it about the land, or is it about the ownership, is it about the farmer? Like, is the chatzagah, like these are, how could you ever decide a question like that? So of course you're going to be strict, because how could you decide? It's not deciding between two authorities of different statuses. It's deciding, you're being pushed to decide a question that can never be resolved because it relates to an unanswerable question about, or what is this mitzvah about? Is it about, again, the owner of the land or the land itself? Like, what's the focus of the mitzvah? And that question can never be answered. So that's frustrating, right? I mean, one of Rabbi Lichtenstein's students was like, who was a community rabbi who, like this is so, and who recognized the state of the Israeli economy depends on our ability to sell this even today, and strategically it's super important because of the, we have to settle our borders and we need farms to do that, and, if your peppers are not being sold in the international markets in Holland for the 4 weeks when Israel's the only supplier of fresh peppers, then the next year you can't go back on the market, right? You can't do that. So, so very frustrated that, and you have the Beit Yosef on our side, right? It's you have a heavy hitter, but for Brisker it's very hard to, that there's a lot of pushback against that kind of decision making. So one other thing I'll just say, this method was applied by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik of New York and Boston, also not just to halachic topics, but also to topics of Tanakh and philosophy. So a famous example of that, one of several, is his essay, Lowly Man of Faith, where he notices that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 contradict themselves about a number of issues, the names of God used, whether the order in which the order of creation, man and woman created together, or there's man created before woman. There are several different contradictions, big contradictions between the creation story in the first chapter of Genesis and the creation story in the second chapter of Genesis. And Soloveitchik treats those contradictions the way his grandfather would treat a contradiction in the Rambam and say, it's not about one winning over the other, it's about both of these, there's a fundamental chakira, what is the nature of humanity, right? Adam 1, Adam 2. There are two types of human being that the Torah describes in our relationship to one another, in relationship to God, and in our relationship to the universe. And that's Adam 1 is one type, and Adam 2 is the other type. And Adam 1 is described in Genesis 1, Adam 2 is described in Genesis 2, and both of them are in us. So the reason why the Torah contradicts itself is because humanity is complex and dialectic, and we have both of those personality types, and inside each one of us. And you can go out and read the book. It's worth reading and studying. But what he's doing is taking his grandfather's method of, again, what is the fundamental hakira? What is the investigative question that can resolve all of these different disputes? Right? There's a fundamental Adam 1, Adam 2. These are two archetypes of humanity, and once you understand and define them, then we have 6 different contradictions between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 that then resolve themselves and can make themselves. So that's a very similar method applied to Tanakh and to philosophy.
And in quantum mechanics, we have light, and it could be either
A wave or a
particle
particle
or it
wave,
could
yes.
be,
Yes.
And both of
And
them,
both.
and
Yeah.
both of them are correct.
Good. Quantum physics is the most rabbinic of quantum physics. That's definitely true. In a lot of ways. Yes. Thank you so much. Have a cookie. And next week we'll be studying with Yitzhak Herzog, who was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, and interesting legal thinker and personality. And we will meet in the show next week. So thank you for coming. All the way around. Sarah's returning, and the dishwasher thing is still running, so leave them out, and I will.
Okay.
Thank you. Babysitter couldn't stay. No. Babysitter couldn't stay late, and Sarah's coming back.